Welcome to the next edition of AmiSights. I'm your host. Glad to have my friend Jack Korbutov from the Art of Medicine on today, along with my co-host Lynn Ozer, SBA Queen. And today we have another special guest, Fran Miller, who just became named SBA Prince. So,
Absolutely.
Jack, we are glad to have you. We want to, just for clarity, we did help you get a loan some time ago, and we're happy to talk about that. But the main thrust here is to learn about you, your journey, your business, what you do, and just share everyone a little bit about your business. So why don't you start with where it all started?
Wow. It started when I was probably 3 or 4 years old. So I am a typical first generation here. My parents are immigrants from the Soviet Union. So really, the mission and the vision started with my dad, who came here. He didn't have a single penny to his name. He didn't have a single word of English, but he was forced to move here for many reasons. And he, when he came here, he happened to have a friend who was a cab driver who got him a job as a cab rider here in Philadelphia. And, along with having no English, he didn't know the streets of Philadelphia. He learned the job, he learned the streets, he learned how to speak. He had quite the personality. So long story short, he went from being a cab driver to owning his own cab, sold his cab, bought a little newsstand, sold that, bought a little coffee shop, sold that after a few years. And then he owned a beer distributor, which is when I came along. They couldn't afford daycare, so they had him watching me, and I was just, I'm pretty sure, carrying like a bottle of beer from one end of the store to the other. And that was the start of my entrepreneurial journey. I would grow up.
The entrepreneurial bug, and that was passed right on to you.
Yeah, I grew up with it. And in his prime, he ended up owning a lot of juice bars in LA Fitnesses, which were very lucrative businesses at the time. So growing up, I got to see that, and I just knew, this business thing was for me. The small business entrepreneurial journey was for me. So I went to pharmacy school, knew I was going to open a pharmacy. While I was in pharmacy school, it became very evident during that time that I wasn't going to open a pharmacy after pharmacy school and compete with CVS and Rite Aid, that traditional mom and pop type pharmacy. While I was in school, towards the latter half of school, I ran into this guy who owned what is called a compounding pharmacy out in Westchester. He was gracious enough to kind of tell me more about it, show me more, tell me where to go learn more about it. And for 3 years, the last 3 years of school, every summer break, winter break, spring break, I would go to a different conference, symposium, student boot camp based on this compounding pharmacy idea to learn more about it. Graduated pharmacy school in 2011. I survived one whole year at Walmart Pharmacy before deciding it wasn't for me. And at the time, there was no compounding only pharmacy in the city of Philadelphia. So I figured if I'm ever going to do it, might as well do it. And I opened the Art of Medicine in 2012 at 25 years old.
Fabulous. Well, okay, that in and of itself is an amazing story, but talk to us, for the entrepreneurs in the audience, of how that was to, okay, you had the idea, you're the pharmacist, you know what you're doing, and you spent a lot of time in pharmacy school. How did you learn about business to open up the pharmacy? I mean, that's a lot to undertake.
Yeah. And I had mentioned my dad had those juice bars, and a peanut butter smoothie is a lot different than making a hormone cocktail for a menopausal woman. Yeah, there was definitely a lot of self-taught things. I was lucky to have a pretty good network at the time, and I was able to go to multiple educational events, again, conferences, symposiums all throughout the country before I even started. And then as I got going, really continuing to do that. Unfortunately, pharmacy school doesn't teach a lot about compounding because it's something that was around hundreds of years ago, but it's just now kind of making a big comeback. This whole thought of customized medication, personalized medication. So yeah, it was a lot of self-teaching, and there's organizations out there that I leaned on heavily to help me get through those first few months. But those first few months were scary for sure.
For opening a business. So what about pharmacy school teaching you about business and owning your business? And did you put together a team? Do you work on your own? How did you negotiate your lease? All those things that young
Yeah,
entrepreneurs need to know how to do.
it was ugly. I picked up a few books. Honestly, in the beginning, I really leaned on my dad for advice,
Sure.
just based on his experience, and as well as my mom too, who helped him throughout the years. Um, but yeah, those first few months, first few years were definitely ugly. It was just me handling everything. So I was the janitor, the accountant, the pharmacist, the technician, the cashier. I mean, even my first day, and I still laugh about it to this day. The very first thing I did when I walked into my store was lock the register keys in the register. And that was my introduction into entrepreneurship.
That's crazy.
Day
Do
one.
you, and now how many employees do you have?
So we have 25 employees now.
Wow. And one
Yeah.
location?
So one location, and working with you guys on the SBA loan, we're looking forward to our next location, which should be completed around June or July, with a move-in date probably July or August. But we're going from 1,400 square feet here to 9,000 square feet in our new location.
Big
One of the
change.
biggest mistakes, because moving is so expensive, one of the biggest mistakes I made in my journey was moving to this location, thinking this would house us for a while. And we moved here in 2019, which we needed to do for space reasons and for compliance reasons as well. But this next space, we want to be there for a while. And don't get me wrong, if we need to move soon after that, that's a great problem to have. But we want to have a home for a while, so we're very excited.
Jack, talk to us about, if you could, maybe it's hard to conceptualize, but if you were to break the journey into a couple of chapters, like the beginning, the next stage, how would you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've definitely had a roller coaster ride here. I mean, the beginning, obviously, like any first time entrepreneur, was pretty tough. Just learning everything, learning the ropes, learning how to do it. A big part of compounding is educating doctors and physicians and providers in general what we do and trying to get them to send patients to us. So it's, as much as we sell to the consumer, who's the patient, it's very much a B2B business in terms of marketing and sales. So as a 25-year-old going to providers' offices, trying to educate them on this, my age didn't necessarily, it wasn't the most trustworthy thing for them, coming in and being such a young pharmacist trying to get their attention. But then, I developed a groove, eventually was able to hire a sales rep. We, at that time, were taking insurance for our compounds, and we quickly ramped up around 2013, 2014, and it was a great journey. We started doing really well. We were getting licensed in a few more states. We really found our niche, and full disclosure, we were doing extremely well, in the millions, up until 2016, January 1st, 2016. I'll never forget. I guess it would be January 2nd, 2016. I walk in and I start trying to bill some of my patients, and every single insurance company stopped covering compounds pretty much all at once. So it was like an Armageddon. So overnight, I lost 90% of my revenue. I needed to let go of all of my employees except for one, and pretty much start over. I needed to find a brand new niche, needed to go from insurance to cash. It was very rough at the time. And at the time, I also owned a CrossFit gym that wasn't necessarily doing good. We were trying to exit that. So it wasn't the easiest year.
In
Yeah, please.
2016, so that means in 2015 there was legislation passed, or the insurance companies just got together and said, "Oh, hey guys, we're not going to cover this anymore." Like, what
The
was it?
latter,
Really?
the latter. They can just decide what to do.
With no warning to you?
No,
It's
no warning to us.
insane.
No, but more importantly, no warning to the patients
Right.
who were, yeah, depending on our medication.
Oh
So
my God.
it was a rough time. I couldn't pay myself for 6 months of the year. I was lucky that I had some savings, but yeah, we went from, doing very well early in this, chapter, and yeah, just back down to zero pretty much. But I was much more educated at the time. I knew how to talk to providers' offices. I really, really believed in this compounding thing in personalized medication. So, and there were pharmacies out there who stayed cash only throughout this whole time anyway. And I thought to myself, I know these people, if they can do it, I know I can do it. So we pivoted, we did well. And then, new regulations came along, meaning that we had to move pharmacies because some of the things that we compounded, we needed special rooms to compound these things in, almost like clean rooms or adjacent to clean rooms. So we found this new facility. We built it out. We built out like the clean room-esque thing for hazardous drugs that we make, and hazardous drugs being hormone replacement, a few veterinary medications. We moved here, and then we went on this journey of trying to prove to be the best of the best. So we received something called PCAB accreditation, Pharmacy Compounding Accreditation Board, which less than 1% of pharmacies that can compound actually receive this accreditation. It's completely voluntary, but that was a big step towards showing that we want to be the best. We want to exceed the minimum standards set by the State Board of Pharmacy and really the FDA for compounding. From there, a few years after that, we started scaling up pretty well. Not explosive growth, but really like solid 30-40% year over year. Then came a few years ago when I joined EO Philadelphia, which was really life-changing for me. Went on this path of, hearing about this thing called EOS. Everyone's talking about EOS, EOS, EOS. I didn't think much about it at first, and then someone recommended reading the Traction book as well as Rocket Fuel. And Rocket Fuel changed my life as a book. After taking the Rocket Fuel assessment, I realized I am a 5 million% visionary, but I am not that integrator that my business needed at the time. And we were growing to a point where there was just too much to organize. Now, I'm not essentially that like super hyper vigilant organized person. So I realized I needed to hire an integrator to really help operate the business. And that changed everything. I found an integrator who came from another compounding pharmacy, probably a top 10 compounding pharmacy in the US. She happened to be wanting to move back here from Texas because her family was here. She had a young kid and she was pregnant at the time, so she wanted to move back closer to her parents. She kind of gave me the roadmap of what to do if I really wanted to scale this thing. We realized we needed to get licensed in all 50 states. So when we took her on, late 2024, we were licensed in 13 states at the time. She kind of said, listen, if you want to get big, you got to get licensed everywhere. So all of 2025, I spent studying for various state licensing exams, took 12 tests, passed 12 tests. We applied everywhere. And as of about 2 months ago, exactly 2 months ago, we got licensed in all 50 states. So we're able to serve the entire
Great.
nation. Thank you. Thank
Tests
you.
similar or are they different?
They're different. Yeah.
Really?
70% similar, 30% different. Yeah. Every state kind of has their own twists and turns and regulations.
It's interesting.
And I barely passed pharmacy school. So taking that on at the beginning of 2025 for me was one of those big one of those BHAG goals. I didn't think it would actually happen, but I really bought in. We've got the right team here. We've got the right the right goals, the right vision, mission in mind. So it helped, and worked out.
Does she still work for you?
She does.
Yeah.
Yes, and I'm not letting her go. Yeah.
Tell us about how you would describe the business today and how you would like to see it 5 years from now.
Yeah. So we're very much if you pair us up against other compounding pharmacies, I would say we're a mid-tier compounding pharmacy in terms of our size and volume. One of the reasons we got licensed in all 50 states, I mean, number one, we just want to serve more patients. But number two, there's this obviously emerging theme in the US that you can't ignore. And that theme is telemedicine. You have companies like HIMSS, who they're actually a public company, publicly traded company, companies like Roe, and there's hundreds, if not thousands, of big, mid-tier, small telemedicine companies, and they're continuing to come. And just the way America's going, less and less people want to get off their couch and actually go to a doctor's office and want to spend a $50 copay for 6 minutes with a provider. So a lot of Americans are opting for telemedicine. They can hop on a laptop. They can have a doctor's appointment on their laptop, the comfort of their own home, with a real specialist who can prescribe what they're looking for. And that's really the goal. That's part of the reason we got licensed in all 50 states. These bigger telemedicine companies really just want to work with 1 or 2 compounding pharmacies instead of 1 in each state. Logistically, that's just really hard. So working with one that can ship everywhere across the US makes it a lot easier for them. So that's one of the reasons we did it. Now, 5 years from now, we're obviously going to be in our new facility. We're also going to be getting into sterile medications. So injectables, eye drops. The goal is to be able to fill everything for everyone that we can. I
Question right
see
here.
us,
When you talk about
sure.
Hims and Roe that you see all over the computer, they are not pharmacists. They actually come to you to get the drugs. They're just salespeople, a sales organization.
So Hims and Rows are telemedicine companies. They connect you with a provider, a doctor, physician's assistant, nurse
Right,
practitioner.
right,
They do an intake like you would at a doctor's office, and you have a doctor's appointment with them
right.
or a
So they're the
provider
doctor
appointment.
end of it.
Exactly. And then they pick a pharmacy like ours
Got it.
to
Okay.
send a prescription to, and we fulfill it. Now, companies like Hims, they're so big, they have their own compounding pharmacy, but I only mention them because they're the most
Yeah.
recognizable
Yeah.
name.
Okay.
But Jack, why wouldn't they send someone to CVS?
Simply because a lot of the medication that they need is not commercially available. So by commercially available, you hop into a CVS, they have medications that they, big pharma studies, and those medications are essentially a one size fits all. They maybe have 3 different doses, but there, at any given time, there's 3% of the population that cannot be supported by a commercially available medication for various reasons. Dosage form. Um, I can give you a few examples right here of where kind of a compounding pharmacy would come in. I had mentioned I have a 3-year-old who is quite a picky eater in general. Let's say, God forbid he gets sick with a bacterial infection and he is prescribed an antibiotic that's only available in tablet form at CVS. That's the only thing commercially available. For anyone that has a 3-year-old out there, they are not
Wow.
swallowing
Yeah.
a tablet. So what we can do as a compounding pharmacy is we can take that active ingredient, which is XYZ antibiotic in powder form. I can make that into a strawberry flavored suspension. He loves strawberries. We make it into that suspension. It tastes good. We can dose it exactly the dose that he needs. He's happy. We're happy as parents because he's getting better. The provider's happy. It's a win-win-win all around. A little more complex of an example, let's say dermatology. There's a very common ailment called rosacea. It's basically redness in the face. It can be caused by a lot of different things. It's not unusual for a patient or a doctor to prescribe 3 different creams for this patient. And at CVS, your insurance doesn't cover it. Each cream is $200. Okay. It's a few issues when you have to apply 3 creams. One, you apply 3 creams. That third cream, you're diluting so much. Whatever active ingredient is in that third cream is not getting to your skin. Number 2, you apply 3 creams. That's not fun. If you're tired, you're probably going to skip more days and compliance is just not going to be there. Third problem, you're spending $600 a month at CVS. What we can do is we can take those 3 active ingredients at their true dosage forms, the true concentrations, I should say, combine them into 1 cream. Patient gets 1 cream from us. They apply 1 cream, easy to apply. Okay. Nothing is diluted because it's the true concentrations they need. It happens to be $60. And not that we're allowed to sell things solely on the basis of cost, but when a patient can save 90% on their medication, that's again a big win for everyone.
So do you
They can
educate the
they can go to CVS and get charge insurance, but they can't charge insurance through you. Is that correct?
Yes, but many times insurance companies do not cover what they deem to be a more cosmetic cream because rosacea, it's not damaging necessarily to your skin. It's just like redness. And these insurance companies don't want to tell their shareholders that they're paying $200 for someone's redness on their face. So many times these are not covered.
Is that the same thing? I had cataract surgery, and the big thing that people talk about afterwards is you have to take eye drops like 15 times a day. And then I had to pay a certain amount of money to get this eye drop that I only had to use 3 times a day. Was that from a compounding pharmacy?
I'm not entirely sure, but very possible. Ophthalmology, eye drops are a big niche in compounding.
Yeah. And so my doctor told me about that. That's what I was going to ask you is like, how does someone who goes to the pharmacy for 3 different creams for the rosacea even know that there's a possibility to get this in one cream? Is it you educating the doctor or educating the like, I wouldn't have known that I could if, I had to pay extra, but I wanted to, it wasn't covered, but I only wanted to use eye drops 3 times a day instead of 8 times a day. But the same thing with the cream, like, how do you find that out
Yeah.
as
It's
a consumer?
so really, like I mentioned, and I feel like I'm a glorified sales rep 90% of my time here. One of my main jobs right now is educating providers on what they were not taught in medical school. As much as I want to educate the public, and we've done webinars for the public, for patients, so that they understand what to maybe ask their provider for. The provider is the one that ultimately makes the decision to write the prescription. It's up to the patient whether or not they want to pay. That's their decision. But the one who decides what medication the patient needs is up to the provider. So a lot of my job is going out to providers and telling them, hey, do you have rosacea patients who need 3 creams? They're paying $600 a month, blah, blah, blah. We can make it into 1 cream, save them a good amount of money, and compliance helps out a lot. And again, we can't market just on the basis of cost, but it's obviously a big factor that does matter. Sometimes the patients just won't get a medication or 3 medications because of the cost. So my job really is to educate providers, and I'm in this unique kind of position as the owner and the pharmacist in charge, where I have the clinical knowledge, where I can educate the provider and kind of speak their language, but also the business knowledge, where I can set prices, talk logistics, explain how the process works once we receive a prescription. So that's why, since 2012, that's really been one of my primary jobs here at the Art of Medicine,
Got it.
and one that I love doing. I love educating
So
providers.
somebody comes into the pharmacy and they tell you they have this problem. Do you have providers that you send them to so they can get a script?
Yeah, that's rare, but yeah, if they come in with a very specific need or want, we have a list of providers that we work with that, we can typically recommend.
Interesting.
Let's jump a little into your SBA journey, and SBA Prince Fran here, who helped you with this, is here, and talk a little bit about that experience.
Up and down. Fran
Great.
was the
Yeah,
up.
I was gonna say great and maybe a little PTSD too for no
Yeah.
fault of Jack's, but
Yeah, I feel like I needed some of my medications here. So it was, yeah, in full disclosure, it was a tough journey. We're dealing with, it was a big project. There were some bumps and bruises along the way. Without Fran, I would not have been able to get through it at all. In hindsight, I almost compare it to like a GC, uh, like building the building. Like, I know what I want. I have a vision for what I want, but I can't build it. I can't put the walls together. I can't put the clean rooms together. Fran was almost my like GC for the loan. Like, I knew what I needed. I knew what it looked like mostly, but without Fran, who was my SBA GC, for lack of a better
Love
term,
that term.
it just wouldn't have been a reality. And, even when it came down to like projections and building those out, dealing with some complex matters like environmental studies, that was a really bad bump. But Fran kept everything nice and even and keel. There's no way I would have just been able to do it myself, like point blank. And I've dealt with everything you can imagine in 14 years of business, but that it was not the easiest process, but Fran made it much easier than what it could have been.
And I think that's important for listeners to know, is that often having nothing to do with the lender, right? SBA loan processes can get hairy. Poo-poo can happen along the way. And we hope we try to take as much of that pain away as possible. But not sometimes SBA loans just go smooth. Environmentals work, appraisals work, buyers and sellers agree. There's no discrepancies. There's no last minute tax stuff, and everything just flies smooth. It doesn't always happen that way.
and I would add, obviously lenders are very de facto numbers wise, right? But Jack and his team were at an inflection point, right? They were adding infrastructure quickly to scale, right? They were paying for the licensing, right, which was incurring a lot of one-time related expenses in a short period of time, right? There was significant short, investments that were happening in real time for long-term provisions, right? Attached to what's also, would you say 1,400 square feet to 9 or 10? I mean, like it was on the
Big
basis
lift.
of projections, right? Largely that was going to be driving repayment on the loan, right? Not every lender's comfortable with that, right? So, put all the environmental stuff was the biggest hiccup, right, in which Jack and team had to deal with. But, we were also telling a proper story, right? I mean, I think logically a lot of things lined up. That's why Lender and Jack were successful. He was able to tell us the vision, and then let's filter that to where the bank needs it to be, right? I think that was the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Fran, you bring up a great point. I mean,
Yeah.
I know the language of medicine. I know the language of sales in this field. I know how to talk to patients. I know how to talk to providers. I know how to talk to my employees. I didn't know how to talk to banks. I just isn't in my repertoire. I don't know what they're looking for. So when Fran had me develop and really frankly helped me develop this story, um, and this vision, it was a great exercise for me because it really helped shape, what our true projections are. But he was able to refine it and convey it to the bank in a way that they felt more comfortable working with someone like me.
It's very interesting.
Yeah. I always say we're storytellers. Jack, talking about a vision and a future, if you could visualize your business 3 to 5 years from now, what do you see
Numbers wise or just in general?
Both.
in general?
Yeah, I want to be, more subjectively, I want to be considered one of the premier compounding pharmacies in the US that's licensed across the US. A pharmacy that does things right, a real leader that other pharmacies can look up to. We have our financial vision. I would love for us to hit certain numbers, which I think we fully can hit in this new facility. But, and on a more personal note, I just want to build something that will make my now 3-year-old future 6-year-old and my baby coming in July, who's going to be 3 or 4 in 3 years, 4 years. I just want them to be proud, like I was proud of my dad of what he did and what he built. That's really what I want. I want my 2 sons to be proud of what I've built.
Congrats.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Yeah, thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's happy and sad for me when I hear Jack's story, and also coming from an immigrant family. And I think about a lot of the changes that have happened in SBA policy in the last year, making it much, much tougher for immigrant communities to get SBA loans. It makes me sad. So
Yeah, everyone deserves a chance.
is that a bad statement, Lynn?
No, it's not a bad statement. It's just a fact. And who knows? It could change. The pendulum swings with SBA. We know that. Back and
It'll
forth.
swing
It could change again.
but yeah, it'll swing again. So, Jack, any thoughts about how EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, has helped your journey?
I mean, I can't even put it into words. EO really sparked for me. I mean, when I joined EO, my son was 6 months old. The company was growing, but it wasn't growing into like what I envisioned and what, I had hoped for. So EO, getting in there and, having a group like my forum just to talk about the personal, the family, the business side of things once a month, realizing that these businesses that couldn't be more opposite of mine, they're running into the same issues that I run into. All of us run into the same issues. It was so immensely helpful. And the track that it led on for me to then develop something like EOS, just at the moment that I really needed more structure, more organization in my business, the timing of it was perfect. I mean, EO is great, but I think everyone in their entrepreneurial journey needs a peer group to help them get through whatever time they're in, whether it's a bad time where the business isn't doing well. And I know you have your grit group, Ami, or on the opposite end of the spectrum, like if you're scaling like crazy, that can be its own set of problems. It is its own set of problems. So having people to bounce ideas off of who have maybe been there before, it's just invaluable. Because listen, I love my wife, but she does not understand what I'm going through. I have great friends, but they have no idea what I'm talking about. When I complain to them, no one does. I can't talk to my 3-year-old about it, even though he probably has some better advice than some other people I talk to. I really think EO a peer group full of entrepreneurs is almost a necessity. I don't know how you can get through this on your own.
Awesome. Appreciate you. God bless. Where do our listeners find you?
Yeah, so our website's theartofmed.com, short for the art of medicine. Same as our Instagram. If you're someone that understands compounding or wants another option, or if you feel stuck with a certain disease, or you've seen lots of doctors and something's not working out, feel free to just email us support@theartofmed.com. You'll always be connected to a pharmacist, whether it's myself or one of our other 5 pharmacists here. We're happy to help. We love helping people, and as big as we want to get in like the telemedicine scene, it always starts with one patient. We always want to help whoever we can. So thank
Awesome.
you guys for
Great.
having me.
It's a pleasure to meet you.